What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'll break down what's happening to the market thus far, what you should be watching for as time progresses, and why tomorrow is going to be another very important day. But before I begin to all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the markets. I just wanted to mention that when it comes to SPY, this thing has been stuck between supply and demand, and it's showing some life right now. So it's trying to hold a critical support. I'm going to break down what the support is, however, that it needs to hold for this thing to remain in this range, and also which resistance levels you should be watching for this thing to turn bullish. I'm going to break down some important things about this and also how the other tickers are looking in just a few minutes. Let me first talk about some data real quick. So for tomorrow, it's going to be Wednesday, January 17th. It's a very short week this week, if anything. And we have retail sales coming out in the morning and lots of imports and exports data at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So watch for some volatility. This could actually help the markets to some extent. The last time this data came out, the market was actually kind of sideways, didn't really do much. So watch for volatility an hour before market open and see if this causes any pushes or not. And then throughout the day, we have a bunch of Fed speakers. We have Barr, Bowman, Woods from the Fed all giving speeches around 9 o'clock a.m. right before the market opens. And then later on, as time goes on, we have some manufacturing numbers at 9:15. Besides that, all the other pieces of data are very minor, from retail inventories and such. And we have Beige from the Fed and Williams from the Fed giving a speech. So we have a bunch of Fed speakers. We have Beige, Williams, and the list goes on. A bunch of these Fed speakers throughout the day. So we'll see what this causes. Generally, when these guys speak, this doesn't really cause much, at least as of recent. The market tends to just trade sideways. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, I also want to mention that for earnings, okay, and like I said earlier in my morning video, we had Goldman Sachs, PNC, First Bank, Morgan Stanley. They all had their earnings. Earnings were very mixed. We had some beats, some misses, and I would say guidance was kind of mixed. Some of them had strong guidances, others were not as strong. Very mixed overall for the last couple of earnings reports, last couple of trading days. And now the question is, what's going to happen tomorrow? Well, for tomorrow, it's going to be Wednesday. We have Charles Schwab in the morning before market open. Then we have US Bancorp and just a few others. So very minor earnings from the banks, but Charles Schwab is going to be the most important one. And after market close, we have Discover and just a couple of others. So we'll see how that goes. Very minor earnings after market close. Charles Schwab will be the most important one for tomorrow. As far as the Fed tracking tool is going, I just wanted to double check this. So far, it's kind of flat. It's kind of like the same as before. We're actually seeing the odds of us getting some kind of cut going into March. It's actually going down just slightly, in a very, very minor manner. The odds of the Fed, the odds of the Fed giving us some kind of cut has dropped a little bit. The market's a little bit less certain relative to before, so we'll just have to see how that goes. I also wanted to pull up my Fear and Greed Index. I actually forgot to open this up. The Fear and Greed Index right now is currently still at greed, but it's a little bit less greedy than before. This used to be at 80, then 71, now it's at 70. Still kind of flat. Market momentum is still very greedy. Everything else is kind of the same. But one thing that's very important is going to be the VIX. The VIX is trying to get above the 50 moving average, but it hasn't broken above 14 yet. So we'll see if this thing can break it or not on the daily time frame. But the VIX is showing some life. I wouldn't necessarily get too excited yet. We have to see if we can get a follow-through move, and if this thing tries to break above like 15 or so. We're getting closer, but we're not quite there yet. So what do I see on the charts, guys? I want to break down something very important. To be frank with you, some charts are actually looking kind of bullish. Other charts are looking kind of stationary, such as SPY. So here are some important levels. So this thing has resistance right now, based off the current level we're at 475.5 and then 476. Then we have this 477 zone to 478. Those are going to be some resistance levels. For support, we have 474 and then 473 to 472.9. That's going to be critical. So this support right here, sorry that I have so many of these. I know it's a little overwhelming for some people, but it's very important that I go over these. See this big yellow line in the bottom? This it's basically close to 473 area. If we close below this, then we're going to favor the bears. Okay, that's going to be very important. If we manage to close it above at least 476, we could favor the bulls a little bit more. Otherwise, we're just kind of range bound on SPY. It's very stationary, like I said earlier. It's kind of stuck for now. So we're going to be watching to see if we close below 473 or not. However, I do want to mention that looking at Apple and Nvda and a few tickers, there is potential that these things could drag the market up higher. So there is a chance SPY might try to push up tomorrow morning back into the 476s, then make its way back down, just trade kind of sideways. We'll see if that ends up being the case, but just be prepared for that just to be safe. Now, if SPY manages to break above the 477s again, we're going to see an attempt to get to 478. If we either break this or close above this, we're going to be heading for 480 pretty quickly. And then we'll see if we reject here because that's where we have tight resistance. So those are some important levels. Look for a push tomorrow morning. It might try to push higher thanks to Apple and a couple of other tickers just temporarily, though we might see sideways price action after that. Now, what about the downside I mentioned earlier? Well, the thing is that I mentioned is the downside could come in the future. We're just not ready yet. And I think that as we approach the month of March, that's when we're going to see some downside. Otherwise, the market's kind of stuck at these levels and there could still be more upside coming for the very short term. Now, I also want to mention that on SPY, you pull up SPY, at least on the 4-hour time frame, right? SPY is still holding above the 50 EMA. It's also fighting around the 20 EMA, so we'll be watching that as well. Not looking the best on the 4-hour, so we'll be watching that. On the daily time frame, it's kind of like indecisive right now. It is actually looking a little bit weaker, but just to be safe, we'll watch this gap to see if it tries to fill this gap first before it rejects. So that tells me that there are two possibilities. It still could rebound temporarily and come back down. It hasn't officially lost critical support at 473 yet to favor the bears. SPY is indecisive overall. That's what this is telling me. It could actually push a little higher thanks to Apple and a few other stocks before coming back down. But overall, I would say that it's still in this range. So it hasn't really broken out of the range just yet. Now, as far as Tesla goes, I just want to mention that Tesla, in my opinion, looks bullish. Tesla's looking bullish now, just temporarily, right? This is just a temporary bounce. I'm not saying it's going to like squeeze to some crazy high number. Just a temporary bounce is coming. This resembles kind of like an inverse head and shoulders reversal structure. And also, we had this big wick below before we got the breakout. We actually pushed above this and we closed above 220, which is pretty good for Tesla. So that tells us that they grabbed liquidity down here. They got this breakout. We filled this gap and started pushing. We're also getting very tight for Tesla right now. So generally when that happens, we tend to see Tesla bounce. So a big surge in volatility tends to come. On the 4-hour time frame, we're getting some good volume on Tesla. We're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. Going to be testing this 20 EMA. We may even break this. So this would be a big trigger for more upside. That's why I believe that this favors the upside. So I think Tesla going into tomorrow is going to try to push for 225. If we break that, it could push all the way up to the very high 220s, like around 229 to 230. That's going to be our next target. If we break 225, there's a very good chance it's going to do that. Now, we do have some minor resistance levels to watch for, such as 226.6. We have some little resistance there. 228 is very, very minor. I'm sorry, 227 is minor. Then we have 229 to 230, which is going to be next. There's a very good chance it's going to be pushing up to these higher levels. If we break 225, my guts tells me it's going to be pushing for at least 225 tomorrow. The chart is looking bullish from a technical standpoint. When it comes to the QQQ, well, let me actually talk about Apple and Nvda first before I break down the QQQ. Something very important is going on. Apple had a head and shoulders like structure, right? This did play out. It did actually play out. We got this big drop. I called this out. And then we bounced after the Supreme Court decision came out. So as a result of this, now we're forming kind of like a reversal inverse head and shoulder structure. Going to be looking to see if we could break 184. If we break this and hold above this, we're going to be pushing for 185.6, which could actually help SPY and the QQQ push up. So this might actually reverse and start pushing back up just temporarily. There is a chance that Apple will try to achieve that. Watch support at 182 and then 181 and 180. Watch resistance around 184 and then 185 and 185.6, followed by 186.5. With inverse head and shoulders, there's a very good chance it might actually uptrend. If Apple breaks 184.25 and holds above that, look for a push for this gap fill at 185.6 just temporarily. It does favor a little bounce, just a very small bounce like this before it comes back down. So watch that carefully. We'll see if that ends up holding. Now that's important because when you look at Nvda, this was even stronger than what I was expecting. It actually broke above 550 to 552 and pushed up for another new all-time high. But I just want to mention that on Nvda, we actually are forming a potential bullish wedge right here, forming a nice bullish wedge. This favors some more potential upside going into tomorrow. So if we manage to break above the resistance around 568, if this breaks, we're looking for a push for 570, then eventually 572.5, and then 575 above that. So far, I would say that this is looking kind of bullish. This is favoring the bulls a bit more. With this pushing, this could actually help the QQQ quite a bit. Nvidia is not showing signs of it like backing down yet. It's just continuing to hold, continuing to push. So I'm going to be watching this very, very carefully. For support, make sure you watch 562, 560, 557, 555, and the list goes on. With this bullish wedge, we could be looking for a nice push to the upside. I could see this thing trying to get up to at least 570. And this might actually help the QQQ. So that being said, what about the QQQ? To be honest with everyone, the QQQ is actually holding up very nicely. So it's very range bound. You guys can see how it's been in this range sort of. Basically, we have support at 408, then 406. There's also some minor support at 407. We have resistance at 410, minor resistance at 411, 412, and then 413 above that. In my opinion, I think that there's a good chance that the QQQ is going to try to push higher. It might try to retest 411 again, especially thanks to Nvda and potentially even Aapl. And if we break this, we could be looking for a push to at least 412, approaching those all-time highs all over again. So it could be trying to make its way back up, at least just temporarily. You could even argue that we're getting tighter on it. So I could even draw out like a support trend line just like this. At least for the temporary short term. So it could be just like on a slight slow uptrend like this. And then we could even draw out like a little wedge here. So you can even like draw it out like this, just hypothetically, right? But you're going to be looking for a breakout if it is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And it is actually favoring the upside a little bit more. It is favoring that it wants to push to 410 plus, eventually break out to 412. So this is looking a little bit stronger than SPY to me relative to the others. The last thing I just wanted to call out is the VIX. The VIX is showing some, excuse me, the VIX is showing some life here, but we have this this nice gap on the VIX. So we did get this push to the upside like I was talking about, but be careful with the VIX because the VIX has this big gap below, has a big gap below. If the VIX loses 13.4 right here, 13.3, sorry, this wick right here, the gap could get filled and we could see the market actually push, causing that to happen. We're also approaching this resistance around the zone right here in the 14.3 to 14.5 area. If this rejects and comes back down, that could signal the market potentially pushing. So I want to be very careful with the VIX. The VIX might not be ready to explode quite yet. Could take a little bit longer. So just be patient and we'll just see how it goes. Otherwise, guys, take care. Please do very, very well. I'm just going to end the video by talking about just a few more tickers very, very briefly. Rivian got this very, very nice looking wick right over here. I'm going to be looking for a test of 18.4. It could attempt to bounce, but overall, despite how oversold it is, going to be watching to see how it holds this support around 17.8. I think it is possible with this wick, it tries to retest 18.4, then comes back down. So watch that very carefully. For the Russell 2000, this thing is still trying to hold its EMA. I'm going to actually zoom out towards the daily time frame. On the daily, we're going to be looking for a test of around 188.8. So it could come a little bit lower to 188.8 to 190 and then bounce off that and fill this gap to 193. So it could drop a little bit more than bounce. That is still a possibility. It does not look like it's done quite yet. For Microsoft, on the daily chart, this is trying to hold up. It actually reached our target. I was calling out 394 yesterday. It reached that. Now with this rejection here, things are getting kind of complicated for it. If it loses the support at 390, look for the gap fill all the way down here around 388. If 388 fails this, it's going to be coming down to 385. So in my opinion, this could be signaling a potential reversal. Look for a backtest of like 392, then a drop to 388. It could actually retrace just a little bit before it tries to like bounce again. So it might retrace a bit then bounce. So we'll see how that goes. AMD was stronger than what I was expecting. We actually got a big bounce thanks to some good news. And now it's approaching the next critical resistance at 160. If it breaks that, 165 will be our next target. There's definitely potential as this trend is still looking quite strong. It's not ready to turn just yet, despite the bearish divergence that's developing. Watch 160 and eventually a push for 165. It's not done quite yet. For Netflix, we were talking about some downside coming to the share price. It came down as predicted. Now we're looking at this 480 area. If we lose this, going to be coming down towards this 472 zone next. But watch the 20 EMA on the daily time frame to see if that holds. For a few more tickers out there, such as the dollar index Dollar's trying to break out, but it hasn't broken with the 200 EMA yet. If it breaks the 200 EMA, this could actually start to favor the bears a bit more since we have an inverse head and shoulders. If it comes up here, we'll have to see if it gets that break or not. It is looking kind of bullish on the daily, but the thing is, the market still held up today, didn't really sink that much, and the dollar is starting to break out. The dollar breaking out could be an early indicator of some selling that's going to come later. So is it possible the market pushes up temporarily and then it gets ready for a sell-off towards the end of the week, if not by next week? We'll have to see based off the dollar, but watch that 103.6 area at the daily 200 EMA as a key resistance. For Coinbase, this is once again attempting to balance. Watch 135 as resistance. If it breaks above this 140 is next. If it rejects, it's going to retrace to 126. I mentioned to you all it's going to test 126. It tested that, then it bounced. So it actually has done quite well. So we also have this gap to fill around 140. So I'm going to be watching to see if 135 breaks. Then we could fill the gap above. With that being said, on Google, in my opinion, we're going to be watching 145. If this holds, it's going to be decent. If it actually ends up breaking down, if we lose this support right here at the 5 EMA at 143.32, watch it come down to 140.67. That's going to be our next level. 140.6 is coming next if we end up losing 143.3. So be very careful. Google is still very flat. It's not really doing much yet. As far as Amazon goes, as predicted, Amazon would drop a little bit. Going to be looking for a test of 150.9 before it tries to bounce. So it might drop a little bit more, but then could try to bounce after that. And for Meta, we finally got our confirmation. We got to move to the downside. We have this gap down here. It's still holding with the 5 EMA. If we lose 367, watch it come down towards gap support at 360. So watch that very carefully. If it holds this, it could retest 370. In my opinion, it looks kind of weak on the daily, so it might sink towards 360 if anything. So that's pretty much it for Meta. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great day. Do what you have to do and be very careful. As a quick reminder, okay, SPY looks more stationary than other tickers out there, but some tech stocks such as Nvda are holding up very nicely. Tesla looks quite bullish. Apple's holding up decently. And I think the QQQ also has potential thanks to Aapl and Nvda, and also thanks to Tesla. Tesla looks pretty good, so let's hope we get a nice push tomorrow. And with that being said, have a great day, guys. I'll see you guys once again tomorrow morning. Thank you for listening. The market to the moon because the long term is still very bright, and peace out.